My sisters-in-law all walked away at the same time. I stood there holding the long list for the family celebration, watching their backs as they laughed and disappeared into the other room. No one looked back. No one said my name. 5 brothers' wives, and not one sister for me. That was the day I knew it was not in my head. The family anniversary was big. Everyone was involved. Cooking, shopping, planning. But somehow, I was left alone with all the hard work while they gathered together, whispering and smiling like I was not part of the family. I am Saris, the only daughter among 5 brothers. People always say being the only girl is a blessing. But no one tells you what happens when the women who marry your brothers decide you are their enemy. As I carried bags alone, my chest felt heavy. I kept asking myself, what did I do wrong? I loved them. I tried to be their sister. I tried to fit in. But they saw me as something else. Before this story continues, please subscribe to this channel. These are real-life lessons wrapped in stories. You might see yourself here, or find healing you didn't know you needed. That day, as I worked alone, something broke quietly inside me. And the silence that followed would change everything. Growing up, my brothers were my world. There was Alrin, the eldest, calm and respected. Bexer, Nalim, Joth, and Rayon, each different, each protective. Or so I thought. When they married, I was happy. Truly happy. I believed God was adding sisters to my life. But slowly, the air changed. When I entered a room, conversation stopped. When I laughed with my brothers, eyes followed me. Smiles became tight. Hugs became cold. I noticed small things first. A plate not set for me. A group chat I was not added to. Plans made without telling me. I told myself, be patient. Love harder. But love alone could not fix what jealousy had already poisoned. I never competed for attention. I never crossed a line. I stayed respectful. Yet somehow, I became the problem. What hurt most was my brothers didn't see it. Especially Alrin. He listened to them more than he listened to me. When they spoke, he nodded. When I tried to explain, he sighed. I began to feel like a stranger in my own family. At night, I cried quietly and prayed one simple prayer. God, please show me the truth. I don't want to fight. The lies didn't come loudly. They came softly. Sweetly. Carefully wrapped. She is proud. She wants attention. She disrespects us. I didn't hear these words directly. I felt them. Alrin stopped calling. He answered my messages late. His voice became distant. One evening, I asked him, "Did I offend you?" He looked away and said, "Just be careful how you act." That sentence broke me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to list everything I had done right. But something inside me said, "Stay quiet." The few times I defended myself before, things only became worse. More misunderstandings. More cold looks. So I chose silence. Not because I was weak. But because I was tired. I stopped attending family gatherings. I stayed away so they could be comfortable. I thought peace would come if I disappeared. But peace did not come. Loneliness did. I knelt beside my bed one night and whispered, "God, you see my heart. If you don't speak for me, no one will." And I meant it. My silence was not empty. It was full of prayer. While they talked, I prayed. While they smiled, I cried to God. I asked Him to guard my heart from bitterness. I stopped explaining myself to people who already decided my story. I started holding my Bible close, even when my hands shook. Some nights, I reminded God of His word. You fight for me. I didn't ask him to shame them. I asked him to clear my name. The hardest part was trusting him when nothing changed. Weeks passed. Then months. Sometimes, I wondered if God was listening. But deep inside, peace began to grow. A quiet peace that said, wait. I didn't know then that God was already moving. I just knew I could no longer fight in my own strength. Then came the invitation. Another big family event. My name was added late. The message felt forced. My heart raced. Every part of me wanted to stay away. But something whispered, go. I prayed before leaving. God, if you don't go with me, I don't want to go. When I arrived, the room felt heavy. Smiles were polite. Eyes watched me closely. I stayed quiet. I didn't know that this event, this very night, would be the beginning of my vindication. Because when God decides to fight for his own, he does not do it quietly. And what was about to be revealed, no one was ready for. I went to the kitchen to get water. That was when I heard my name. I stopped walking. Behind the half-closed door, low voices spoke. One laughed softly. She's pretending to be humble now, one of them said. She wants pity, another replied. My heart beat fast. My hands shook. I held the cup tighter. Then someone said, Alren already knows who she really is. That sentence hurt more than all the others. I quietly stepped back. I didn't want them to see me cry. I didn't want to give them what they wanted. I returned to the living room with a calm face, but inside, I was breaking. That night, I realized something painful. They were not confused about me. They were convinced about me. And someone had helped them convince my brothers. I went home early and cried into my pillow. God, I whispered, you heard them. Please remember me. 2 days later, Alren called me. I felt fear and hope at the same time. Why do you cause problems? He asked without greeting me. I froze. I don't, I said quietly. He sighed. Everyone says the same thing about you. You need to change. That was when I knew. He believed them. The brother who once defended me now saw me through lies. I wanted to shout. I wanted to beg. I wanted to explain every moment of my heart. But my mouth stayed closed. I'm sorry you feel that way, I said. After the call, I fell to my knees. I didn't ask God to punish anyone. I asked him to stand as my witness. I stopped visiting. No calls. No gatherings. No messages. It was not because I hated anyone. It was because my heart was tired. Every visit left me feeling smaller, quieter, and misunderstood. I needed space, not to punish anyone, but to survive. People noticed my absence. Some said I was proud. Others whispered that I was bitter and unforgiving. A few said I thought I was better than everyone else. None of them knew the truth. I was healing. I stayed in my room more. I took long walks alone. I breathed slowly for the first time in a long while. In that quiet season, God became closer than ever before. There were no loud prayers. No long words. Just honesty. I read my Bible slowly, sometimes one verse at a time. I cried without shame. I told God how hurt I was, how confused I felt, and how tired I had become from explaining myself. Then I listened. One night, as I sat quietly, I felt peace settle over me. It felt like warm light resting on my heart. The pain didn't disappear, but it softened. My thoughts became calm. It felt like God was saying, "Stay still." I did not know what he was planning. I did not know how he would fix anything. But in that moment, I knew something important. I was not alone. And I was not forgotten. Months later, something changed. I did not hear it directly. It came through a cousin, spoken carefully, like news that carried weight. She said there was trouble among them now. Small at first, but growing. There were arguments. Not loud ones, but tense ones. Confusion-filled conversations that once sounded confident. Stories that were told before were being told again, only this time, they did not sound the same. One lie was repeated twice, but differently. That was when questions began to rise. Simple questions. Honest ones. The kind that cannot be pushed away for long. Someone asked for details. Another asked for dates. Another asked, "Are you sure?" And suddenly, nothing was clear anymore. I said nothing. I did not call anyone to explain. I did not send messages to defend myself. I did not rejoice or feel proud. I simply stayed where I was, quiet and still. I trusted God. In my heart, I remembered the peace He had given me. I remembered the night He told me to stay still. I believed He was still working, even when I could not see it. Sometimes, silence is not weakness. It is not fear. It is not surrender. Sometimes, silence is wisdom. It is choosing not to fight when God has already taken over the battle. It is allowing truth to rise on its own, without being forced. I stayed quiet. And the crack in their unity grew wider on its own. One evening, as the room grew quiet, my phone buzzed beside me. I picked it up without thinking. Then I froze. It was a message from Alran. "Can we talk?" he wrote. My heart skipped. My hands trembled as I stared at the screen. For months, his name had carried weight in my chest. He was the eldest. The one whose voice mattered most. The one who had believed the stories without ever asking me. I didn't know what this message meant. Was this another accusation waiting to happen? Another painful conversation where I would be misunderstood again? Or was this the beginning of truth finding its way through? Fear and hope battled quietly inside me. I placed the phone down and closed my eyes. I did not rush to answer. I knew this moment was important. I whispered a short prayer, barely louder than my breath. "God," I said, "go before me. Guard my words. Guard my heart." I waited until my thoughts became calm. I reminded myself that I was not alone in this conversation. God was already there. Then I picked up my phone again. My fingers moved slowly as I typed a single word. Yes. I pressed send and sat back, unsure of what would come next. I did not know the direction that conversation would take. I only knew one thing. That simple message would open doors no one could close. And nothing would remain the same after that night. When Alran called, his voice was not hard. It was tired. There was no anger in it, no sharp edge. It sounded worn, like someone carrying too much for too long. The moment I heard him speak, I sensed something was different. "Saras," he said, "I need to ask you something." I held my breath. My body went still. I listened closely, choosing not to interrupt. He told me a story I had never heard before. A story where I was said to have spoken badly at a family meeting. A meeting I never attended. As he spoke, I felt the familiar weight try to return, but I stayed calm. "I wasn't there," I said softly. I couldn't have said that. I did not raise my voice. I did not defend myself loudly. I simply told the truth. There was silence on the line. It was not the uncomfortable silence I feared. It was thoughtful. Heavy. The kind of silence that means someone is thinking. For the first time, he didn't argue. For the first time, he didn't correct me or push back. "I see," he said slowly. The call ended soon after. I sat there, my heart beating fast. I did not celebrate. I did not jump to conclusions or assume anything had been fixed. But I felt it. Something had shifted. It was small. Almost unnoticeable. But it was real. A small crack. And through that crack, truth had begun to enter. A week later, Bexer came to visit me. The moment I saw him, I could tell something was wrong. His smile was forced, and his eyes did not settle in one place. He looked uncomfortable, like someone carrying a question he did not want to ask. "I need to ask you something," he said. The words sounded familiar. Almost the same words Alron had used. My heart stayed calm as he spoke. He repeated another story about me. This one was close to the first, but not the same. Small details were different. Words had been added. Others were missing. When he finished, I looked at him gently and spoke the truth again. I did not rush. I did not defend myself angrily. "That never happened," I said calmly. "That is not what I said, and that is not what I did." He frowned. "That's not how it was told," he replied, clearly confused. That was the moment I knew. The stories were changing. Lies cannot stay straight for long. They bend under pressure. They shift when repeated. They break when light touches them. I did not confront anyone. I did not accuse or demand explanations. I did not call anyone out or raise my voice. I chose peace. I stepped back and allowed truth to breathe. I trusted that it would stand on its own. And as I watched Bexer leave, I felt certain of one thing. What was hidden was slowly coming apart. And I did not need to push it. At the next family event, I noticed it immediately. Something in the air had changed. When I walked in, eyes avoided mine. Conversations softened or stopped completely. Whispers ended the moment I entered the room, like words caught in people's throats. One of the wives smiled at me too quickly. It was forced and uneasy. Another dropped her phone when I greeted her, as if my presence startled her. Small things, but they spoke loudly. It was fear. Not fear of me, but fear of truth. For the first time, I was not the uncomfortable one in the room. I did not shrink or feel out of place. I simply observed quietly, letting everything unfold without reacting. I stayed polite. I greeted everyone gently. I did not ask questions or bring up the past. I kept my voice calm and my movements steady. I gave no one a reason to accuse me of anything. Inside, my heart whispered a prayer. God, keep my heart clean. I did not want pride to rise. I did not want bitterness to take root. I wanted peace more than victory. As I watched them struggle with their own thoughts, I understood something deeply. Sometimes, God does not expose lies by shouting them from the rooftops. He exposes them by letting them collapse under their own weight. He allows guilt to show without a single word being spoken. I said nothing. And yet, everything was being revealed. During dinner, Rayon asked a simple question. It wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It didn't sound like an accusation. He spoke calmly, almost casually, as if he was only trying to understand. When did Sarah say that? He asked. The table went still. No one answered. Forks paused in midair. Eyes shifted. The noise in the room faded until the silence became heavy. It pressed down on everyone sitting there. Someone laughed nervously, too quickly. Another person cleared their throat. Someone else changed the topic as if the question had never been asked. But it had been asked. And it could not be taken back. The answer never came because there was no answer to give. The story had been repeated so many times that no one remembered when it was supposed to have started. But the seed had already been planted. I did not speak. I kept my eyes on my plate and stayed quiet. I did not need to say anything. The question was doing its work all on its own. That night, when I returned home, I cried. But this time, the tears felt different. They were not from pain. They were not from loneliness. They came from relief. For the first time, I knew without doubt that God was working. He was opening eyes and softening hearts in His own way. And nothing could stop it now. Alrin called again. When I saw his name on my phone, my heart paused. I answered slowly, unsure of what to expect. His voice sounded different from before, quieter, more careful. I may have misunderstood some things, he said. The words were simple. They were not dramatic. He did not list details or explain everything. It was not a full apology. He did not say he was wrong. He did not say he was sorry. But it was the beginning. I listened without interrupting. I did not push him to say more. I did not correct him or remind him of the pain his silence had caused. I understood that this moment mattered, even if it was small. After the call ended, I sat quietly for a long time. I thanked God silently. I knew this shift did not come from my efforts. It was not because I argued better or defended myself harder. It was because God had been working in places I could not see, softening hearts and breaking down lies. Vindication does not always come loudly at first. It does not always arrive with public apologies or sudden justice. Sometimes, it comes gently. Sometimes, it starts as a whisper, one sentence, one moment, one changed tone. And as I sat there, calm and steady, I knew something else. That whisper was only the beginning. And soon, it was about to become a storm. I went home that night and prayed. God, don't let me rejoice too early. Finish what you started. Things were no longer smooth. I could feel it without anyone telling me. The calm they once showed was gone. Something underneath had started to break. Small arguments began to surface between the wives. They were no longer united. One accused another of saying too much. Another cried and said she had been misunderstood. Voices rose, then fell. Tension filled the room in ways that could not be hidden anymore. I watched quietly. I did not step in. I did not react. I did not take sides. I simply observed as what they once planned together began to pull them apart. The same agreement that once held them together was now turning into confusion. Alrin started asking questions. Not harsh ones. Careful ones. Thoughtful ones. The kind of questions that search for truth instead of blame. Bexar and Nahum began comparing stories. They talked privately, checking details, trying to understand what no longer made sense. And nothing matched anymore. Dates were different. Words changed. Intentions shifted. The more they tried to explain, the more tangled everything became. For the first time in a long time, I noticed something important. I was no longer the center of the conversation. No one was talking about what I did or didn't do. They were talking about the lies. And as I stood there quietly, I knew God was still at work, pulling off masks, one by one, without me saying a single word. One afternoon, Rayon came to see me. He looked shaken. "Did you know there were voice messages?" he asked. My heart jumped. No. One of the wives had saved messages meant to be private. They were meant to protect herself if things went wrong. Things had gone wrong. In those recordings, my name was mentioned again and again. Not kindly. Plans were spoken aloud. Words twisted. Intentions revealed. Rayon said, "They never thought anyone would hear this. But God did." Alrin called for a family meeting. I did not ask for it. I did not demand it. I did not even imagine it could happen. Yet, somehow, the timing was perfect, orchestrated by a hand far greater than my own. I felt a quiet reassurance in my heart as I prepared to attend, knowing God had arranged this moment. When I arrived, the atmosphere in the room was tense, filled with unspoken words and subtle glances. My brothers and their wives gathered, polite smiles masking the anxiety they could not completely hide. I folded my hands in my lap, breathing slowly, my heart surprisingly calm despite the weight of anticipation pressing down on me. Then Alrin pressed play, and the recordings began. Voices that had whispered behind my back, voices that had twisted my name, voices filled with lies and malice, all of it played clearly, exposing what had been hidden. The room changed instantly. Faces went pale, lips parted in silent shock. Attempts at excuses and denials stumbled and fell flat. No one dared to meet my eyes, the guilty lowered their heads, staring at the floor as the truth confronted them. I remained silent. There was no need to speak. Every word of truth was louder than any defense they could offer. God's hand had moved, revealing what they thought would remain secret. I felt a peace settle over me, a quiet affirmation that justice was finally taking its place, and that the moment of vindication had arrived. I said nothing. Not a word escaped my lips, though my heart was pounding. I didn't need to speak. The truth, long buried beneath whispers, lies, and manipulations, now spoke loudly and clearly, without anger, without shouting, without me lifting a finger. The recordings had done what my words could not. Every deceit, every twisted accusation, every quiet betrayal was laid bare. What had been rumors, subtle insinuations, and hidden plots were now undeniable proof. There was no room left for denial. No clever explanation could erase the weight of truth. One by one, my brothers looked at me. Not the way they had looked before, with blind trust or unquestioning affection, but with clarity, recognition, and the dawning awareness of what had been done in my name. I watched their expressions change. Their eyes softened, their brows furrowed, and I saw something I had longed to witness for years. Regret. It was a quiet, heavy regret, a realization of wrongs done, words believed, and trust betrayed. In that moment, I felt a strange mixture of sorrow and relief. Sorrow for the years of misunderstanding, but relief that the truth had finally spoken, not in whispers or rumors, but in undeniable, piercing clarity. God had spoken, and I had been vindicated without saying a single word. After the meeting, there was no rush to speak. The room, once filled with tension and quiet scheming, now held a solemn, almost reverent silence. No loud apologies came, no frantic attempts to explain or justify. Instead, there was something far more profound: respect. It was the kind of respect that arises when people realize they have been wrong, when they confront the weight of truth, and when they finally see the integrity of someone they underestimated. My brothers, my sisters-in-law, they all understood, silently, without a single word exchanged. I walked away from the meeting with a heart unexpectedly light. That night, I knelt in the quiet of my room, tears spilling freely as I lifted my face to God. "Thank you, God," I whispered, my voice trembling but full of gratitude. I didn't know yet how big this victory was, how far its effects would ripple, but one thing was certain: God had been silent no longer. In that moment, I felt a peace that surpassed the turmoil of months, the quiet affirmation that justice had been done. I had been wronged, but I had been honored. My integrity remained intact, and God's hand had turned every lie into proof of His faithfulness. The next morning, I opened my Bible as I always did, though I hadn't expected anything new. My eyes fell on a verse I had read countless times before, yet today, the words struck differently, as if they were written just for me. "No weapon formed against you shall prosper." Isaiah 54 verse 17. I whispered it aloud. My voice trembled, but the words anchored me. I felt them resonate deep in my bones, vibrating through every anxious thought, every lingering fear, every wound the lies had left behind. The whispers, the secrets, the jealousy, they no longer had power over me. God's words were louder than their schemes, stronger than their manipulations. In that moment, I realized I was free, not because anyone had vindicated me, not because I had forced truth into the light, but because God Himself had spoken and cleared my name. For the first time in months, maybe years, I breathed without restraint. I felt unburdened. The chains of accusation, the weight of suspicion, and the sting of betrayal were gone. God's truth had set me free, and in that freedom, I could finally walk without fear, with a heart full of gratitude and quiet, unshakable peace. After the meeting and the clarity it brought, people began reaching out to me. Friends, both old and new, came quietly, almost reverently, to offer comfort, understanding, and solidarity. They had witnessed the truth, and they stood with me, not because I demanded it, nor because I had to explain myself, but because God had arranged it. Their words were gentle, their hugs warm and sincere. I felt the strength of community, the reassurance of human kindness intertwined with divine timing. No one needed to defend me. No one needed to repeat the evidence or persuade others of my innocence. God's justice had already spoken, and their gestures reflected His peace. I realized that life's most powerful support often comes without fanfare. It is silent, yet steadfast. It lifts without judgment, holds without scrutiny, and restores without boasting. For the first time, I truly understood that while God's hand delivers the ultimate victory, it often works through people, the hands that hold you up when the battle feels too heavy to fight alone. As time passed, family gatherings changed. The laughter returned, soft and warm, but this time it was inclusive, free of hidden jabs and whispered schemes. My brothers approached me differently, slowly, deliberately, with sincerity in their eyes. There were still conversations to have, truths to acknowledge, and reconciliations to embrace, but the bitterness that had once poisoned these moments was gone. God had restored my place, not with force, not with anger or confrontation, but with quiet authority, a dignity that spoke louder than any argument ever could. I felt this subtle shift in energy, the way smiles met mine with genuine warmth, how conversations now held respect and understanding. Restoration, I realized, was often gentle. It did not announce itself with grand gestures or loud proclamations. It whispered, it unfolded, and yet it was powerful enough to heal years of pain. I walked through my home differently now, my steps lighter, my heart freer. I could see clearly that God's work in my life was not just about vindication, it was about renewal, about creating an atmosphere where love and honor replaced deception and jealousy. I learned that true victory does not shout. It does not demand recognition or flaunt itself. It smiles quietly, walks humbly, and trusts God to display its worth. I moved through the rooms of my home with a new awareness. Every glance, every gesture, every small interaction carried the weight of dignity restored. No one could question me, no one could undermine the quiet authority God had given me. It was a victory measured not by applause or accolades, but by the peace and confidence that radiated from within. I did not need to point to evidence or remind anyone of the wrongs I had endured. The restoration was visible, undeniable, and complete. And then, as if to mark the fullness of this moment, my brothers planned a surprise that took my breath away. One evening, they led me outside, smiles wide, hearts open, and revealed a brand new Mercedes SUV, gleaming under the setting sun. "It's for you, Saris," Eldrick said, his voice soft but sincere. "For all the patience, all the love, all the grace you've shown us despite everything." Tears streamed down my face as I realized this was not just a gift. It was a symbol of honor, a tangible acknowledgement of my worth, and a celebration of the justice God had brought into my life. I stood beside the Mercedes, heart full, feeling the love that words could never fully capture. My brothers surrounded me, proud and affectionate, reflecting God's faithfulness in their actions. God had turned my trials into testimony, my pain into proof of His power, and my endurance into a celebration of truth. The peace that filled my heart now was louder than any whisper, stronger than any lie that had once shadowed my life. I knelt quietly that evening, whispering a prayer of gratitude. Thank you, God, for vindication, for restoration, for love that speaks in actions, for peace without bitterness. And in that moment, I knew God had finished his work. I was honored, celebrated, loved, and at peace, truly home, in every sense of the word.